What happens if New York City or Washington, D.C. is wiped off the global power grid in just one single second? Imagine a massive solar storm, a G5 class geomagnetic blast, slamming into our atmosphere, instantly frying the satellites we rely on, and overloading high-voltage transformers across the coast. If our most essential technological allies, the internet, GPS, and the ultra-smart grid, suddenly refuse to cooperate due to a catastrophic hardware failure, the United States has to activate its secret second strategy. This means bypassing our digital dependence and instead launching a survival protocol from a forgotten era. Distance is usually the enemy in warfare, but in a blackout, time is the ultimate killer. But just how resilient is the American power infrastructure? To begin with, the US. Electrical footprint is massive. There are over 7,000 power plants and millions of miles of transmission lines keeping the lights on for over 330 million people. This includes massive hubs and high-tech command centers in every state. Losing access to this sprawling, interconnected network is a logistical nightmare, which is exactly why a secret backup plan is necessary. If we are denied our modern technology, what is this latest strategy they pull out of their sleeves? The core of this plan isn't a new piece of software or a faster AI. It is a massive logistics shift, heavily relying on a forgotten architecture of analog systems and mechanical precision. We are talking about a coordinated activation of infrastructure that hasn't been the priority for decades. Why are these outdated systems now considered the lifeblood of our survival? Because without them, the city simply cannot breathe. If the smart tech doesn't respond, the skyscrapers are grounded. So how does the government actually flip the switch on a plan that was designed before the internet even existed? To understand the sheer magnitude of the backup plan, we first have to look at the titan that currently keeps our world spinning. The modern American electrical grid is often described as the most complex machine ever built by man. It is the digital nervous system of the empire, a sprawling, interconnected web of over 7,000 power plants, 3,000 individual utilities, and more than 450,000 miles of high-voltage transmission lines that never sleep. In a city like New York or Chicago, the flow of energy is not just a utility, it is the heartbeat of civilization. At the center of this marvel is the smart grid. This isn't just a collection of copper wires and steel towers, it is an invisible army of sensors, fiber optics, and advanced algorithms. In high-tech operation centers, AI-driven software monitors electricity demand in real time, performing a delicate dance of load balancing that happens in microseconds. These systems utilize what we call frequency response, a critical mechanism that keeps the grid vibrating at exactly 60 Hz. If that frequency drops even a fraction due to a sudden surge in demand or a plant failure, the entire network risks a catastrophic cascading failure that could plunge whole regions into darkness. To prevent this, the US has deployed monstrous energy storage solutions like the Tesla Megapack installations. These are essentially massive, high-density battery farms designed to act as the grid's shock absorbers. When the sun goes down or the wind stops blowing, these megapacks discharge massive amounts of power instantly to stabilize the frequency. But moving that much power across the continent requires incredible force. This is where the massive step-up transformers come into play. These silent giants sit in substations across the country, boosting electricity to hundreds of thousands of volts so it can penetrate across state lines with minimal loss of energy. We've even evolved toward the implementation of microgrids. Think of these as self-sustaining islands of power. In a crisis, a microgrid can island itself, meaning it physically disconnects from the main national grid to keep high-value assets like hospitals, military command centers, and water treatment plants fully operational while the world around them goes dark. It is a multi-trillion-dollar fortress of engineering, a technological shield so advanced it feels invulnerable. The scale of this infrastructure is almost impossible to comprehend. Every time you flip a light switch, you're tapping into a synchronized global symphony of physics and software. We have spent over a century perfecting this machine, adding layer upon layer of digital protection, redundant circuits, and automated fail-safes. On paper, the American grid is a masterpiece of modern security, built to withstand everything from localized equipment failure to record-breaking heat waves. But this level of extreme sophistication comes with a hidden, dangerous price tag. Because as we've made the system smarter, more efficient, and more interconnected, we've also made it more fragile. What happens when the very technology that protects the grid becomes its greatest liability? But here's the detail most people miss. When the power goes out in a modern metropolis, it isn't just the lights that die, it is the very infrastructure of survival that begins to evaporate. This is what experts call the 48-hour countdown to collapse. Why does a city like New York or Los Angeles fall so quickly? Because we have traded mechanical resilience for digital efficiency, and that trade has created a logistical nightmare. The first fatal vulnerability is the water. Most people assume gravity does the work, but in a skyline dominated by steel and glass, you need massive electric booster pumps to push water to the upper floors. The moment the grid fails, the faucets in every skyscraper go dry. For millions of people living above the 5th floor, the most basic human necessity vanishes instantly. Without water to drink or to flush toilets, the high-rise paradise becomes a vertical desert. Then, look at the elevators. In any given second, There are tens of thousands of people moving vertically through the city. When the frequency response fails and the grid slams shut, these people are instantly entombed in steel coffins. But the crisis is deeper than just being stuck. Because the cellular towers rely on the same grid and their backup batteries only last a few hours, the ability to call for help simply disappears. This is the silent killer of modern life, the total loss of communication. Emergency services become blind and deaf exactly when they are needed most. Moving to Tactic 3, the food chain. We live in an era of just-in-time logistics. Grocery stores no longer keep weeks of inventory in the back. They rely on a constant rolling stream of trucks coordinated by GPS and real-time data. If the digital nervous system is paralyzed, the trucks stop moving. Even if they could move, the refrigeration systems at the distribution centers would fail, turning billions of dollars of food into waste within a day. If the trucks don't move, the city starves. But perhaps the most disgusting threat is the failure of the waste systems. Our cities rely on complex sewer lift stations to move millions of gallons of waste away from populated areas. Without electricity, these pumps stop. Waste begins to back up into the streets and the lower levels of buildings, creating a public health catastrophe that no amount of modern medicine can fix in the dark. It is a crushing strategic pincer. No clean water coming in and no waste going out. Finally, we face the total evaporation of the economy. We are a cashless society. Your credit cards, your Apple Pay, your bank accounts, they are all just magnetic signatures on a server that is now dead. In a blackout, your wealth doesn't just decrease, it becomes inaccessible. The economy doesn't just slow down, it vanishes. So if the digital armor of the United States is stripped away and the city is blind, thirsty and starving, is there any way to fight back? The answer is yes. But to find it, we have to look past the broken glass and dead screens toward a secret strategy hidden in the shadows of the past. But if the digital armor of the United States is stripped away and the city is blind, thirsty, and starving, is there any way to fight back? The answer is yes. Focusing only on the failing smart grid and the silent sensors is a mistake. The United States holds a massive ace up its sleeve that doesn't need to wait for a satellite to reboot or a software patch to upload. Even without a single functioning microchip in the tri-state area, the nation can deliver life-saving infrastructure for weeks to come. This is the domain of analog resilience. While the modern world looks at the sleek, glass-covered skyscrapers as the pinnacle of achievement, the secret to surviving the blackout is hidden in the shadows of the past. To understand this, we have to look at the legacy systems we once called outdated. This is the activation of the Cold War playbook, a strategy designed for a world where digital systems didn't exist, and survival depended on the raw laws of physics. Why are these ancient systems now considered the lifeblood of the city? Because they are the only things that cannot be hacked, fried, or bypassed by a solar storm. Let's look at the first door kicker of the analog strategy, the gravity-fed water system. While the high-tech booster pumps in the new luxury towers are dead, look up at the older horizon. You will see thousands of cedar and steel water tanks perched on the rooftops of the pre-war buildings. These are not just relics of a bygone era. They are floating bridges of hydration. These tanks are filled by simple mechanical pressure during normal times, and when the grid slams shut, they use nothing but the Earth's own gravity to push water down into the pipes. They don't need a single watt of electricity to provide water to the residents below. In a total blackout, these old wooden barrels become more valuable than the most advanced AI server on the planet. They are the silent saviors that keep the thirst at bay when the digital pumps fail. But how does the government communicate if the fiber optics are melted and the satellites are spinning uselessly in orbit? This is where Tactic 2 comes into play, the return of the shortwave. The military and emergency commanders don't rely on 5G or high-altitude drones for their second strategy. Instead, they activate a coordinated deployment of analog high-frequency radio networks. These systems hug the terrain and use the ionosphere as a mirror to bounce signals across thousands of miles. Unlike satellite signals, which must penetrate the very atmosphere where the solar storm is raging, shortwave radio stays below the electronic horizon. It is a subsonic form of communication. Slower, yes, but incredibly reliable. It allows commanders to loiter on the airwaves and strike through the silence, coordinating the movement of resources without ever needing a functioning cell tower. The most critical asset in this geographic shift of strategy, however, is the mechanical diesel generator. In the basements of every major hospital and government bunker sits a monster of engineering. Modern generators are often equipped with electronic control units, delicate chips that would be the first to erupt and fail during a geomagnetic surge. But the ace up the sleeve is the inventory of legacy mechanical engines. These are purely robotic precision from a different century. They use mechanical fuel injectors and physical governors. They have no software to crash, no digital voice to silence, just iron, fuel, and intense pressure. When the launch order is given, these engines roar to life with a subsonic rumble, carving out safe corridors of power for the pilots of our emergency services. If the chips don't work, the iron flies. You might wonder why we kept this costly, aging inventory instead of fully transitioning to the tried and true digital future. The answer is simple. Redundancy is the ultimate enemy of collapse. By maintaining these silver bullets of analog tech, the US creates a crushing strategic pincer against any threat, natural or man-made. The goal is to blind the crisis by presenting more functional targets than the blackout can disable. While the tomahawks of the solar storm are still impacting our modern sensors, the analog systems are already deep inside the problem, fixing it. This is the detail most people miss. We are clearing out the digital inventory only to find that the Cold War tech is the perfect cheap solution for the modern drone of chaos. Commanders are hoarding these brand new old tactics for the big one, the day the lights don't come back on. In a conflict with the elements, the United States doesn't just fight with what is new, it fights with what is unstoppable. We use the old missiles of engineering to save the modern tech for the recovery. By reaching back into the Eastern Mediterranean of our history, we create a strategic advantage that no other nation can match. These legacy carrier systems of logic can launch a response at a moment's notice, accelerating the recovery according to a programmed curve of resilience. Once the city reaches takeoff speed again, the analog shuttle releases it, and civilization lifts off. The door kicker then slows down electromagnetically and returns to its starting position in our history books, ready for the next launch. Striking back from the darkness means we must cross immense distances of logic. The digital jets simply do not have the internal fuel capacity for a multi-day round trip without a grid. The analog systems act as the floating bridge. They rendezvous with the survival packages mid-air to top off the tanks of our society, allowing us to penetrate the chaos, drop the payloads of relief, and make it back to safety. If the analog tankers don't fly, the modern world is grounded. It is a surprise ambush tactic designed to protect high-value assets like human life while remaining almost impossible to detect by the sensors of the storm. This is why being outdated is actually our ultimate salvation. In the end, we have to realize that modern technology represents the wings that allow our civilization to soar, but these legacy analog systems are the deep roots that keep us anchored when the storm hits. We've built a world of extreme digital efficiency, but as we've seen, efficiency is often the secret enemy of survival. The 48-hour countdown to collapse only becomes a permanent logistical nightmare if we forget the mechanical architecture that originally built our society. By maintaining this strategic depth, this crushing pincer between the high-tech future and the low-tech past, the United States ensures that the lights never truly go out on our resilience. We don't just build cities to grow, we build them to survive. We hoard these legacy tactics like silver bullets, keeping them polished and ready in the hidden corridors of our infrastructure. Because we know that history isn't just a relic, it's the floating bridge that will carry us into the next century. This dual-layered strategy is the door kicker that clears the path for a recovery that no solar storm or cyber attack can halt. It is the ultimate insurance policy for a nation that refuses to be silenced by the darkness. But what about you? If the grid went dark in your neighborhood today, do you have a mechanical ace up your sleeve? Are you relying entirely on the digital cloud? Or do you have a gravity-fed plan of your own? Let us know your survival strategy in the comments below. It's often the small details that most people miss which make the difference between being grounded and taking off again. We make original videos from scratch, analyzing the complex systems and hidden strategies that keep our world moving. Stay resilient and stay ready.